my buddy, single officer buddies are like, hey, look, why don't you just start hanging out with us? It's the weekend. We're going to go to some bars. You're the token Mormon guy. You don't drink or smoke. You can be the designated driver, right? So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, okay. I need to do something because like I come home to an empty house and it's like, it's completely sad to be there. So I started going out with them, right? And after doing that for a few weeks, then they're like, "Hey, why don't you have a beer? Why don't you smoke some cigarettes, whatever?" So I started doing that, and I, you know, so basically, I started to numb the pain, right? And doing these things allowed me to numb my pain of my heart. They weren't healthy things to do, right? Now that I'm 51, I can tell you, hey, here's exactly what I would do in that situation. But at 28, right, I'm figuring out life, and I'm by myself. I have no support. I'm in Fort Carson, Colorado with my unit, right, by myself. Um, and then what happens is, I start chasing women, right, and that seems to like make the pain go away. But the problem is, I never healed. I didn't handle it in an appropriate way. And so um, I would say my childhood BS that I went through, right, then got compounded with, so basically I started building an onion. You can think of an onion of layers of trauma, right? So the core of that trauma was my childhood, right? And then I had this first real thing where I get just slammed in the face, punched in the face by life. There's my next layer of trauma, right? And that's basically a wife that left me, that just destroyed me. Okay. And then I start building all these different layers throughout my life, right? And I didn't even know what emotional healing was. I had no idea.
Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you. This episode is sponsored by Arrowhead Leadership Consulting. What are your organization's biggest pain points right now? Low EQ leaders, weak managers, toxic culture, high turnover, low engagement, leader development, lagging behind company growth, no company career path. Let us know if your organization needs leadership coaching, workshops, training, or keynotes. Visit arrowhead-leadership.com for more details, arrowhead-leadership.com. EQ Gangsters, this is a quick intro for the episode with Burris Wollsieffer. He is a West Point grad and shares a tremendous journey of ups and downs, lots of very tough situations. And thankfully he has received a breakthrough, and he is in a different spot in his life, but went through a lot to get to where he's at now. And he shares some solutions that have worked for him. The point of the episode, and I have already talked to him about this, the point of the episode for me is that he had a struggle and he is now at a different place. The vehicle with which he found, which has worked for him, is not the point for me to share the episode, because you may have I had a very different path, right? For me, I had a very different path. For me, I sought breakthrough through the Lord, and God was able to give me breakthrough with a lot of emotional healing and emotional work. And Burris had a very different path to his breakthrough. And so again, the point is, wherever you're at in your journey, there is hope. If you have a very challenging experience in life, like Burris shares here for a couple of decades, there is hope. Whether, again, it's the way Burris went, the way I went, the way others have gone. The point is, there is hope wherever your journey's at. Hope you enjoy the episode. Burris is a phenomenal guy who has gone through a lot in his life, and I'm grateful that he was able to find his breakthrough.
I was born to my mother, and she was a recent widow, right? My father, I don't, I shouldn't say this. I mean, I don't talk about it a lot, but it is part of my story. My father died at 28 years old in Yellowstone Lake. So he was on a Boy Scout trip. He was a leader, and you know the Cliff Note story is they built these homemade canoes. They weren't they weren't legit canoes. They were made out of these kits, and it was in July. I was born in December, and the park rangers told my dad, they're like, "Hey, look, these are pretty flimsy canoes, and you guys don't have a lot of life jackets." They're like, "You need to stay close to shore because you know we have these squalls that come up here in Yellowstone Lake, and they're like, if you get out there too far, what happens is these squalls can get up to 4 or 5 feet, and it's treacherous." Well, so what happened is uh, they started fishing. They're catching cutthroat trout. They got further away from the shore, towards the middle of the lake. A squall came up, just like what these guys said, a summer storm. They had 4 foot waves, and their canoes just like disintegrated, right? And my dad gave his life jacket to one of the Boy Scouts, and he was like trying to save kids, and he died of hypothermia, and his body sank to the bottom of the lake, right? And to this day, he's still there. That's his resting place. So, you know, the I mean, it's pretty wild, but to me, the greater Yellowstone region is very sacred to me for a couple reasons, because my family's been there for 100 years, and my dad's final resting place is in Yellowstone.
Wow.
So I go to Yellowstone every year, spend time with my dad, connect with him,
Wow.
visit his grave. But that was tough. Not having a dad, it was really really difficult. And my mom's father stepped in and was really a great father figure to me. He was a World War II Army vet. He was an officer. Was a CEO of a bank, a Western bank. I mean, best man I've ever met in my life. Highly integrous. I mean, I owe a lot because of him. He really encouraged me to go to West Point, things of that nature. But my mom got remarried when I was 3.5 to my current dad now, and we did not have a good relationship. Uh, uh, and I don't want to badmouth him at all, but it just wasn't a good relationship, right? And I get to West Point, and then he comes to me and says, "Hey, I read the Long Gray Line, and I'm really sorry about what I did." And we kind of amended things, and then we kind of had a falling out a couple of years ago, so it's kind of bit back to where it was when I was younger. But it was really tough because I wasn't always around my grandfather, right? And I had a man in my life that was, you know, uh, sometimes he was present, sometimes he wasn't, right? And it was hard. And then I had a little brother that came, and he was way more, uh, he was way more loving to my brother, right? So it was kind of like my brother and my dad, and it was like my mom and me, right? Which was not, it's not really a very healthy kind of environment. But what ended up happening? So this is part of my story. So what ended up happening is, to get my dad's attention and to feel like I was worth something. I was an overachiever, right? So like in grade school, I was the valedictorian of my 6th grade class. I get to junior high, I was the valedictorian. I get to high school, I'm the valedictorian. I do sports, right? And like I did this thing called Key Club. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's kind of like a Kiwanis youth organization. If you've heard of Kiwanis, and I end up being, I go to this Key Club or I go to this Key Club convention in Salt Lake City, and and then I'm encouraged to run for the governor of Key Club, right? And so it was just kind of like I ran and I won, right? So I'm the Utah Idaho Key Club governor. I'm over like 60 high school key clubs or something like that in the two states, and then I do well as governor, and then I'm encouraged to run for international president, and I run for Key Club International president. This is a crazy story, right? And I go against this girl from Missouri, and Key Club's got like 1,200, organizations in the world, right? And so I lose to her, and then I'm actually elected to be an international trustee, and so I oversee like the Pacific Northwest and Utah and Idaho. So I'm over like Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, and so basically that's what helps me get into West Point, right? Because West Point was really, they're like, wow, you got some amazing leadership. You're valedictorian. I was like first in my class. I was this go-getter. And underneath of it all, Noble, and this is kind of where we're going to talk about real stuff, right? Underneath of it, I was highly insecure, and I did not have any self-love for myself. And I was this overachiever because I wanted to feel like I was worthy of my dad's attention. I was worthy of my family's attention, right? My mom would say stuff like when I was little, in church, I would, and this is when I was like 4 or 5, but basically, I wanted a lot of attention, and I would kick little girls in the shins just so I could get attention, right? So this basically is sort of the crux of some issues I have later, right? So that really is from, that's from childhood to my adult years. And then, go to West Point. We're classmates. So I do West Point, and I'm struggling at West Point because when you get there, I was a big fish in a small pond, and then I get to West Point, and and you know what I'm talking about. You're with studs. You're with the best of the best that America has to offer. That's who you're with. You're with all these Captain Americas, right? So I've never gotten a B in my life, never gotten a C in my life. I go to West Point, right? And what's funny about that is I got my first C, and I was pissed off because I tried really hard, I studied really hard, and I got my first C, right? I got it in plebe English. I was really ticked off, but in the sciences, I excelled, right? So I mean, I end up slugging it out. I think my first year I get like a 2.8. Second year I bring my overall GPA up to like 3.0, right? And then I take I go on a mission for my church between my sophomore and junior year, yuck and cow year. And then I served my mission in San Jose, California, which was an amazing experience because I basically just served other people. I brought them to Christ. In one of the different churches I was in, Steve Young would show up every Sunday if he wasn't playing football. This is on his heyday, right? And he would bring these beautiful women to church, these different ones, and I would talk to my companion like, "Oh my gosh, did you see how beautiful that girl was?" He'd have his red Porsche in the church parking lot, So it was a fun time. It was like during Netscape, right? During Yahoo was just getting started in the Silicon Valley. It was a really amazing kind of electric time, right? And so I get off my mission, I come back to West Point, and I think the Lord really blessed me. But I get back, and instead of getting 3.0s, I'm like basically getting straight A's at West Point. I don't know if it was a blessing. I mean, it was amazing. But I came back there, and like every class, I'm getting A's, A pluses. But where I hurt though is cow English. Right. For your viewership, you know, at West Point, we have to do what's called the West Point professional writing exam. Right. And they don't do that anymore, but it was a silly, stupid, I don't know why they did it, but essentially they give you all these articles and then you'd have to like do this, analyze it, write this, thing, and it would get judged, and you had to pass it in order to graduate West Point. Well, what's really funny, because now I'm a writer, right? So I've really kind of I lean into this gift that I have, but when I was at West Point, I didn't have it, and what was funny is I failed the West Point writing exam 3 times, and I failed cow English. So instead of having a 4.0, I have like a 3.5, right? And I'm not like getting, I'm not a Star Wreath geek. I'm trying to become a Star Wreath geek, but basically the cow English is my nemesis. So I ended up having to like, my junior year, I had to like stay and do summer school and take the stupid, cow English class. That was actually my first year, sorry. But anyway, the last time I ended up passing it, right? Look here, kid at Wollsieffer. If you don't pass this test this time, you're done. You're not graduating. So it was a miracle from God. I passed it, right? But anyway, I ended up graduating still pretty good. My overall GPA was like 3.37. If I wouldn't have struggled with the writing, I would have had, I would have been like way up there. But anyway, it is what it is. So that's through West Point. And I didn't really have a lot of problems at West Point. I got along with all my classmates. Got a lot of very dear relationships. And then I go in the Army, right? So I'm commissioned. I choose armor. I choose to go over to Germany. I'm in 137 armor, and I get married, right? So I marry. So this is where life gets real, right? And I'm going to talk about some things today, but this is where life really gets real. So my parents essentially wanted me to marry this gal in Utah, and my mom was really pushing it. And my senior year at West Point, I'm dating her, and all my buddies are getting engaged, and I'm like, geez, I need to get engaged, because that's just like life, right? So I I get engaged to her, and we're just, we're doing this fantasy relationship, because she's coming out for all the balls that we have at West Point, right? And she's like digging that, and it's like this, Cinderella kind of experience. And here I am, this strapping, young thoroughbred, you were too, right? And so, she falls in love with this whole kind of like, idea of this West Point Army guy. Then we get married, and go to Fort Knox for the basic course, right? Learn how to become a tanker, on Abrams main battle tank. We get pregnant, and then we have a really difficult pregnancy. And that pregnancy, we had 2 twin girls. We had what's called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. One of the girls, if you ever get it's very, very rare, but if you get it, essentially what it means is they have the same blood supply in the placenta. And so one of them ends up becoming stronger because they're both fighting for the same blood supply, right? One gets weaker, right? So I didn't have a lot of money, and I go to my father-in-law. I'm like, hey, we need to get this surgery for your daughter, my wife. He's like, hey, she's your wife. You figure it out. So I was like, I figured it out. I coughed up the money. She went down to Florida and got the surgery, and essentially there was only like 3 guys in America that do it, but they go in there and they separate the blood supply, right? And so they do that so that they have their own blood supply, right? And so we do it. Things are going pretty well. I'm in Germany. right? In my assignment, she's in Salt Lake City, Utah. A couple months go by, and then she goes in for her her physical or her checkup, and the doctor's like, "I got bad news for you. One of the girls has passed away." Right, and this is like 6 months, so we only had 3 more months to go for them both to be born, and then basically what happens is that baby is just rotting inside of her, right, decomposing, and then she gets super sick, and then the doctor's like, "Look, we got to go in there and we have to operate, right? We got to Your one daughter that's in there, we got to save her life." And so we did it, and then she was born 3 months premature, and she has cerebral palsy because of being born so early. And it breaks my heart because my daughter, she can't feed herself, she can't bathe herself, right? She's in a wheelchair. So this is my first real kind of like getting hit in the face really hard, right? And this is what I kind of want to talk to you about, because as men, there are you are going to have to go into arena, and you're going to have to fight the lion, and you're only going to have a knife, okay? And that lion represents trauma, right? So we're going to have some good discussions today, Noble. So this is my first entry into the gladiator ring with the tiger or the lion, right? And I did not pass the test. Okay, so it came after me. I fought as hard as I could. I wasn't always there, emotionally present for my wife, right? And I kind of checked out because I I was having a hard time handling everything. I was in Germany, she was in Utah, right? I ended up getting compassionate reassignment. Come to Utah. The closest Army base is Fort Carson, Colorado. So then I go from 137 Armor in First Armor Division, and then I go to the Third Armored Cavalry Regiment, and that's my new spot. And as soon as I get to the unit, I report to my squadron commander, and he's like, "Well, get ready because we're going to go to Bosnia, right?" And so I get my wife out of the hospital, move her to Fort Carson. We got base housing, and literally we're only together for a month, and then I get shipped off to Bosnia for a year, right? So it just screws things up. So I'm never present. I'm never there. I mean, we're trying to. Back in the day, we're doing this kind of like video chat thing. It was like Zoom, the Army had. So you'd get on, we talk like once a week or whatever, but that's just not enough to sustain a relationship. And then I get back, and like we're together maybe 4 or 5 months, and then what happens is, right before 9/11, I know this is kind of a crazy story. So right before 9/11, she's like, "Hey, I'm going to go visit my mom." So she leaves Fort Carson, goes to Salt Lake City, visits her mom. 9/11 happens. We all remember when we were in service what happened that day. I was like, doing PT with my guys, get back to my house, changing my clothes, put on the TV, 9/11. I'm like, whoa. The next day, my wife's supposed to come back. And then she calls me and says, "I'm not coming home." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean you're not coming home?" And she's like, "Yeah, I need some space." And I'm like, "What do you mean you need some space?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know if I want to be married to you anymore." So I'm like, "Oh my gosh, come on, honey, please come home. Like, let's figure this out." Right. And so this is where, I'm in the arena, I'm in the gladiator arena. And what happens is over 6 months, I'm begging her, I'm driving up from Colorado Springs to Salt Lake City every other weekend to see my daughter, to see her. And she basically gives me a Heisman. She's like, "No, I don't want to see you anymore." We tried doing counseling. And then after 6 months of trying everything, I went to my father-in-law and said, "Look, I mean," I'm like, "I know we've had a difficult start here, but I'm like, I love your daughter. I want this to work." Right. He's like, "Look, Burris, I'm going to do everything I can to get her to come back to you." So he'd take her on nightly walks. And then after about a month of that, he's like, I can't get her to change her mind. He's like, I'm so sorry. I've done the best that I can. I can't get her to come back. And so what happened is that's that's when I'm in the arena. The tiger, the lion jumps on me, gets me by my throat, and that's where I crash. Right? I literally I can remember in my bed late at night, crying and pleading to God to say, please bring my wife back. And it didn't happen. And I completely I was in the lowest I've ever been in my life, right? And I fought so hard to make it work, to bring her back. And it came to a point where I had so much emotional pain, Noble. I had so much pain that I wasn't doing well. I was not doing well, and my heart hurt so bad. You know, one of my single officer buddies in my squadron just said, "Hey, man, we're all seeing you go through this." He's like, "This is really hard on us." He's like, "Why don't you just come out with us and just like, be with us? You know, we're your brothers. We don't want you to suffer because I was suffering." And I was crying. I mean, I would cry myself to sleep every night. And I did that for months. Right? I go into my daughter's room, look in her room. I'd ask my wife, "Hey, when are you coming home?" "Yeah, I'm not coming back." Right? And then she's like, she filed for divorce, and that was it. So then when she filed, I was just like, I was despondent. Right? I was just like hurting. I was really in a bad spot. This is my first real test of life. So my single officer buddies are like, hey, look, why don't you just start hanging out with us? It's the weekend. We're going to go to some bars. You're the token Mormon guy. You don't drink or smoke. You can be the designated driver, right? So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, okay. I need to do something because like I come home to an empty house and it's completely sad to be there. So I started going out with them, right? And after doing that for a few weeks, then they're like, "Hey, why don't you have a beer? Why don't you smoke some cigarettes, whatever?" So I started doing that, and I, so basically, I started to numb the pain, right? And doing these things allowed me to numb my pain of my heart. They weren't healthy things to do, right? Now that I'm 51, I can tell you, hey, here's exactly what I would do in that situation. But at 28, right, I'm figuring out life, and I'm by myself. I have no support. I'm in Fort Carson, Colorado with my unit, right, by myself. Um, and then what happens is, I start chasing women, right, and that seems to like make the pain go away. But the problem is, I never healed. I didn't handle it in an appropriate way. And so um, I would say my childhood BS that I went through, right, then got compounded with, so basically I started building an onion. If you could think of an onion of layers of trauma, right? So the core of that trauma was my childhood, right? And then I had this first real thing where I get just slammed in the face, punched in the face by life. There's my next layer of trauma, right? And that's basically a wife that left me, that just destroyed me. Okay. And then I start building all these different layers throughout my life, right? And I didn't even know what emotional healing was. I had no idea. Okay. And so then what happens is, because I didn't heal myself, I was out there dating a bunch of women, then married this gal, my second wife, I didn't know very well. And I'm getting deployed to go to Iraq, right? And so part of me is like, oh man, I want to have the emotional support of a woman at home, kind of a thing. and I didn't. I should have dated her a long time. I would have never, we would have never have got married if we would have dated for 6 months, a year, whatever. I only dated her for 3 months. Get married, go to Iraq, come back, and I'm like, um, get out of the army, and then get my first job, and we go to Chillicothe, Ohio, because I got hired on by General Mills to be a production supervisor at a General Mills plant that makes pizza rolls, pancakes, whatever. And move her. Then she gets pregnant with my second child, which is my son. And then I wake up one day and I'm like, I don't want to be married to this gal. Like, what did I do? Right? I was just like, man, this is bad. So, I had all this trauma, and then, we're together for 10 years. The marriage didn't work because I had a lot of issues that I had to work on, right? A lot of emotional healing that I didn't do. And, that relationship didn't work out. And what happened is I started having a lot of anger issues. And I think being in Iraq, I got PTSD from Iraq, and I'm not going to sit here and say that my PTSD was all from Iraq, because it became another layer of the onion, right? So I've got my childhood, I've got, my first wife that leaves me, I got Iraq, right? I'm not going to say that I wasn't a door kicker. I wasn't like, grabbing all these Haji guys, throwing them in prison. I was in the S3 shop, and I was nighttime battle captain, and I'd have to travel the regiment. We'd get shot at sometimes. And then, where I got my PTSD was there was a weapons cache that was blown up, right, by some Iraqi guys. And I was like running around getting my PTN, and that cache blew up. Like, I don't know, I was probably 50 yards away from it, blew me back, right? It got blown back about, I don't know, 20 feet or something. And I had shrapnel. I could hear the shrapnel whizzing by, because it was just it was basically pre IEDs, right? And then, so that was sort of like an IED, right? And then when we were over there with the 3rd ACR, and I was over in Iraq, they started to like deploy all these IEDs in Iraq. I was in the Al Anbar province in Fallujah. I was in some really nasty places. And then we started having a lot of guys from our regiment get killed. Like, we started getting guys getting killed by IEDs on a regular basis, right? And I remember, one day, Josh Byers, 96 guy, he just took in command of Fox Troop, right? I was in a 3 shop, and we were sitting there in the TOC, which is called the Tactical Operations Center, and we're basically just, we're horse playing. He's like, man, I hate this place. He's like, I just want to get back to my wife in the Springs. I'm like, yeah, this place sucks. So we were kind of like, just letting off some steam, doing some wrestling, just, having fun. The next day, Josh is on a mission, and he gets blown up by an IED, right? And I'm sure you heard of that story with Josh. That happened the day after we were just like talking about like how much we hated being there, whatever. And so, I lost a lot of dear friends. I had some PTSD from that, right? I'm not going to say Iraq was like the main reason why I had PTSD, but I started to get some really bad PTSD. Okay. And I started to have a lot of anger issues inside of me. And then what happened is, so getting back into my relationship, I'm in Ohio, we moved to Chicago because I'm going to get an MBA. I get accepted at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business to do their weekend MBA program. I moved the family there. But essentially, I'm going to kind of shorten the stories up, but essentially I started losing jobs because I had anger issues, right? Because it just started manifesting itself. I had all these really emotions, kind of like, I want you to imagine being on the back of a bucking bronc. That's how it felt inside of me. I had these crazy ass emotions. I was in a lot of leadership positions in a lot of these companies, and if I got too stressed out, I mean, my rage came out. Like, I would get pissed, and sometimes I'd swear. And I remember losing a job because I told some guy to go f off, and then he went to HR, and then I was, that was it, right? So I started having these problems, and then having job losses. That's another layer of the onion. Okay, and so I just get to the point where you know I get in my 30s. You know, so I get divorced from my second wife. I didn't heal myself, right? I'm like, I tell myself this, and this is crazy to even think this way, but I'm like, I want to, I want to get remarried again, and I think a woman's going to complete me, and I think that things are going to be better, right? So I start dating and stuff like that, and um, unhealthily. So I look back upon this now. I literally dated, probably in a period of a year, I dated over 100 women. Over 100 women, right? There were some weekends I'd have like 4 or 5 dates lined up. I go out with a girl Friday night, go out with a girl Saturday morning, go out with a girl Saturday night, maybe have a Sunday date, right? I mean, I was just constantly dating. And I look back on it, and the reason why it was is because I had so much emotional pain in me, and I didn't want to be alone, and I couldn't sit with my pain, right? I couldn't be still, be silent, and I couldn't face all this stuff, right? So I was like, oh, I just got to distract myself, right? I'm out there like dating all these girls, and I come across two really special ones that are like world class women, and they picked up on that I wasn't healthy. They picked up on that I had a lot of emotional healing, and they basically said, hey, they told me, they said, hey, if you were like through all this stuff, like, you'd be a great guy to be with, but like, I can see through your BS. So they took off, right? And that was like a slap in my face, like, whoa, what just happened here, right? But then so what happened is, it got me started thinking about, like, geez, I got a lot of issues. I need to like figure out things. Um, right. And I end up getting married a third time, and I didn't date this gal very long. I dated her for probably 4 months. If I would have dated her for a year, what would have happened is I probably would have not married her, because she had a lot of anger issues too, right? So you had me with anger issues, she had anger issues, and I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it. She was a narcissist, right? So it was really all about her. She was a really beautiful gal. She had a lot of good qualities. I mean, she was very spiritual. She was very giving. We had some great chemistry. We had some really great times. We went on a lot of trips. But the relationship was unhealthy, and this is when I lost myself, because she wanted more and more and more out of me, and it was all about like, hey, you need to put me first, and you need to fulfill all of my needs, right? And I was making a lot of money, and I'm like taking her all these trips because, we were in Louisiana, and she's like, oh, this is a really heavy place, and I need to get out of here. And I'm just like, I mean, I'm like writing checks, spending money, taking her to different places, because she's supposedly an empath, and she's having a hard time living where we were living. I was building a plant for a private equity company, running this facility. And essentially, I remember 2, 3 years into, my uncle pulls me aside. I'm in Island Park at my uncle's cabin, and he says, I don't think this gal is really good for you. He's like, you need to probably bow out of this. because she's really unhealthy. And he's like, I don't like how she treats her family, and I don't like that she is a narcissist. He's like, she's like a parade pony, right? She goes in her room and it's all about her, right? And it was. And what happened is there was a lot of emotional abuse that she gave towards me. And when you are emotionally abused, what happens is that the person that's the brunt of the emotional abuse has a hard time leaving that person, right? Because they do a good job of saying, hey, you need me, I complete you. Like, you're not going to ever be successful because I see all your blind spots, right? I'm the best thing that's ever happened to you. I get gaslit all the time. No, that didn't happen. It didn't feel that way. Oh, honey, it's just your PTSD. You just can't remember, right? And then after 10 years of that, I'm just like, oh, I'm a zombie. I'm just like a piece of meat, right? I'm just like, there's nothing there. And that's kind of how Idaho Sun got born, right? In my Facebook page, how you ran across me is I tell that story. And this is where I essentially meet my PTSD and I meet head on my emotional issues. And I climb my own Mount Everest. And I'm in my midlife crisis, right? And I leave this woman, and I probably leave her a couple times. The third time leaving her, it sticks. I go back to Idaho, and she wants to work it out. She doesn't want to get divorced. And I get to the point where I'm like, I can't be with you anymore. We are not good together. Like, this is a toxic relationship, right? And so that's when I began my healing. And I go to the Lord, and I'm by myself in my parents' basement, right? And that's when I really communed with God. That's when I spent a lot of time in nature, and precept upon precept, God showed me different things. Now, he didn't say, hey, Burris, here's exactly how I'm going to get you whole again. But it was like I had to step out in faith, right? And I had to take these little steps, and each step that I took, the next brick in front of me would light up. I take another step. Where do I go now, Lord? Well, that brick was lit up, right? And I so basically over a 2-3 year process, long story short, as I heal myself through his grace and I find out different things. And so then I learn how to reset my body, mind, and spirit. And I come out of this like a new man, right? I'm actually in the gladiator ring. And this time I take my knife and I put it right through the heart of the tiger. And I come out victorious. I'm a gladiator. I figured it out. But it was after all this stuff, right, that I figured it out. I mean, we're talking, this is a 20-year story. This is 20 years of pain going through. And essentially what I figure out is I come across what's called plant medicine, right? And I've got a distant cousin. He's my fourth cousin. He lives in the Mormon colonies in Chihuahua, Mexico. And he says, Burris, we have a thing down here called 5-MeO-DMT. And he's like, you really need to look into this, because he's like, it's not addictive. Nobody's ever died from it. It's 15 years of therapy in a bottle. And look, Noble, I've literally probably, the VA kept me alive, right? Because the Veterans Administration Hospital gave me drugs. They gave me counseling, right? They kept me alive, but it didn't heal me. It did not heal me. So this is my first entry into kind of like this new, like, ancient medicine approach. And so I go down there, and essentially 5-MeO-DMT. I mean, DMT you can find in ayahuasca. You can find it in this, they call it this Sonoran toad, right? The venom comes out of it, and then essentially they take that venom. And I had a doctor / shaman give me this medicine. And when I woke up from this journey that I went on for 30-40 minutes, it was like my brain was reset, right? And that was like the first really big brush I had with my emotional healing. I dumped a lot of my trauma, and I am a believer in this stuff because I did it. Like it was amazing. So what I'm trying to say is, because I went to God to say, "Hey, I want to get healed." Like he would make all these little things started popping up in my life, right? And I kind of these things started happening. I kind of went into it, and it ended up being the plan he had for me to get better. Okay, and so you know, I do this, and then then I have a girlfriend in Phoenix, and she introduces me to psilocybin. Right, she's got a sister that's a practitioner that does these healing modalities, with sound bathing and beautiful music and mushrooms. So I go on my first mushroom journey, and it was beautiful. Right. And so I cried like a little baby. I cried for 3 hours, and I felt like I was completely connected to God. I mean, if you do mushrooms, it's like a 4 hour trip or 4 hour journey. And I'm literally communing with God, connected to the creator. And and literally I'm purging all these negative emotions out of me. Okay. And so, like, before all this stuff, my nervous system was hijacked. I could not regulate my emotions. They were just out of control. But this new different type of medicine came in and saved my life, right? Because I had taken every like antidepressant, I'd taken all this stuff, and it was a godsend. And a lot of veterans are starting to do this. Like there's a lot of special operators, SEALs, Green Berets that are doing DMT, they're doing ibogaine, they're doing a lot of amazing treatments that you got to do in, outside of the States, because in America, since the 70s, Nixon, it's been illegal to do this stuff. And that's one thing, is I want to get to the point where I want to be a voice, to get this change. Because if you administer some of these plant medicines in the right way, they can save lives. And if you do it you can do it in the medical system in a structured approach, and it can really save you. Right. I'm not a big subscriber on, hey, let's get a bunch of buddies together, take mushrooms and get high and just have a good time. Like, no, do it for the right reasons. Right.
So let me
And
let me
so,
let me ask you this, Burris. So in the last 5 minutes or so here before we wrap up, what can you just share? What is Idaho Sun?
yeah,
Number one. So what is Idaho Sun in the last 5 minutes, and then how do we, if someone's got questions for you and
yeah,
more, how do we get in touch with you? How do we connect with you more on some of the stuff?
yeah. So that's the plant medicine parts. That's how I heal myself emotionally. And I heal my body. The way I heal my body is through a plant-based diet and through long form fasting. And so doing long form fasting and doing the plant-based diet, I cured myself of, I was pre-diabetic. I got that figured out. Got rid of acid reflux. Got rid of, I had a lot of irritable bowel syndrome, got rid of that. So basically the fasting, doing 3-day fast, 4-day fast, healed my body. The diet, like, lower my cholesterol, lower my blood pressure. I figured out how to reset my body, right? I figured out how to heal my emotions. And then the last thing is healing. This is what Idaho Sun's about. It's resetting your body, mind, and spirit. The last thing is really like resetting my spirit. And I did that through spending time in nature, right? Being mindful, journaling, and doing things I love again, hunting, fishing. So nature healed my spirit. The plant medicine healed my emotions. The long form fasting and the plant-based diet healed my body. So right now I stand before you a new man. I've completely reset my whole self. And instead of having a midlife crisis, I've had a midlife resurrection. So people can find me. I'm building a website. I'm not done with that right now. They can find me on Facebook. You can actually do hashtag Idaho Sun, or you can, type in Burris Wollsieffer. You'll see my Facebook page. You can join it. But essentially, that's how you kind of came across me talking about things. But essentially, I'm here now to help guide people through their own transformational journey to help them become a new person, right? And I do it through all these modalities, right? So help them really. I'm going to teach you how to fast. I'm going to teach you how to let's figure out your diet, right? And then the next step is, okay, let's get you emotionally healed. We're going to have to probably go outside of America to do it, but this is legal other places. This will help you. And then the last thing is resetting their spirit through the different things I talked about. But if you do all these things, I guarantee you, you will feel like a new person.
Yeah. Awesome. Dude, well, thank you, Burris, for sharing your whole journey, your transparency. That is a tremendous amount of, like you said, the onion of trauma, right? Just you've been through so much. And your super unique approach, but I'm glad that it's been healing for you and work for you, and just you being willing to kind of share your story and your journey with other people, right? That's, man, there's so much. I think in my experience, the last decade of being in this space, there's a lot of healing power of just sharing your story. There's a lot of just getting it off your chest, releasing some of those pent up emotions, and then it normalizes pain and trauma. Like, guess what? You're not the only dude who's been through a truckload of crap, right? We've all experienced, maybe not as much, or maybe it's different, and again, it's not about comparing. It's the fact that, oh, okay, here's somebody else who's experienced some really hard stuff in life. I love the arena analogy, who's been in the arena and he's come out different and better. So there's hope for me. Maybe I go a different route or different path than Burris has, or than Noble has, or than someone else has. But the fact is, there's hope. It's possible. There is healing to be had. And I just appreciate you being willing to share with everyone kind of your journey and stuff. And I really appreciate your time, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. I mean, it's an approach that's worked for me. And I mean, I've got people that have come to me and I'm helping them right now get through the same kind of approach. But I'm telling you, therapy and pharmaceutical drugs, they'll keep you alive, but they don't fix the problem,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And like the food system doesn't help keep you healthy, like, right? It doesn't. So you have to eat a plant-based diet with some protein, right? I call it the hunter gatherer fast feast diet, right? I'm teaching people, but essentially it's like eating the way our ancestors ate 200 years ago. Our ancestors didn't eat 3 meals a day, Noble. They didn't. I'm here to say, like, you wouldn't be around if you didn't have a man back 300 years ago that'd go out there and kill an elk, go kill a woolly mammoth. Those guys weren't eating every day. The long form fasting that I teach people with the nutrition, like, you don't need to eat 3 times a day. I eat 1 meal a day, but that 1 meal that I eat, man, it's got a fruit bowl, it's got vegetables, it's got protein, and then I don't eat till the next day. Right. I do. And I've lost 50 pounds and my health is on point. Like, my blood works perfect. Right. So I'm just saying, like, a lot of guys do carnivore, or they do vegetarian or fruitarian. And what I'm saying is all those approaches aren't good. We're omnivores. Have some fruit, have some vegetables, have some protein. That's how God designed us. And it's a better, in my opinion, with a long form fasting, it's a better health approach.
Yeah, great. Awesome, Burris. Thank you so much for your time, brother. Thanks for sharing with everybody today. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I mean, I just feel bad because they had most of the talking. So, I mean, if you got any more questions.
This was great. I really appreciate you sharing, brother. That was powerful. Thank you, bro.
Hey, you're welcome, buddy.